Hang on a second.
Here we are with Augie Diaz from Miami, USA, and Victor Perez Campos from Palma de Mallorca, Spain. Today we are talking about regatta preparation. So it's a big topic. We can divide this video conference in 3 parts: pre-regatta preparation, pre-race preparation, and pre-start preparation. So I would like to start with Victor about the pre-regatta preparation, and so what usually he does before going to the venue, about the choice of materials, traveling, etc.
Okay, well, hello, Pietro and Augie, and thanks for calling me for this conversation again. Preparing a regatta, obviously preparing a big regatta where you want to go as prepared as possible. I think there are 2 principal things. One is to prepare the boat, which depends a lot if you're renting a boat or if you can sail your own boat. And the other one would be to prepare it yourself for the conditions you're going to find out there. So I would divide in basically 2 main parts, which the first one is to get to know as much as possible of the place where you're going. If you can go there before and sail, it's ideal, but if you can't, you have a lot of tools in the internet now to see previous forecast and the observation of the conditions that are happening during the months where the regatta is going to happen. So you can make quite a good bunch of information to know what should be happening when you are there, so that you can prepare for those conditions and you can train in the most similar thing to those conditions. Here in Palma, in most of the year, at least when it's good weather, we have thermal winds, so in the morning there's no wind and it picks up to 16 or maybe even 18 knots at midday. And there's no waves, obviously, in the morning, and there's more waves in the afternoon, so we can train with almost any. And when the weather is not good and the wind is coming from the north, it comes from the shore, so it's completely flat water and it can be very strong. So we try to analyze what conditions are we going to find where we're going, if it's going to be windy or not, and if it's going to be choppy or with big waves or flat. And we try to train with something similar. This would be the part of preparing our boat. Obviously, we try to sail as much as possible in regattas, but this would be the same for any place that you're going to be, let's say, ready for racing. And the other one is to prepare the boat. If you are taking your boat there, it's obviously much easier because you can work on your boat every day and have it completely ready. If you are renting a boat, you always try to rent the most similar boat of what you have at home and what you feel comfortable with where you're going. This is one of the advantages of sailing with Person or DB Marine, that you have these kind of boats everywhere. And obviously it's easier to copy your conditions from your boat to the boat where you're going. And yeah, we measure a lot of things. Maybe, well, Augie can explain also a lot of the things that we measure in our boat. With the years and with the more experience, I think we've learned that it's not so important to copy exactly the same, but just to know where you are in the new boat. So if we know the tension and the rake that we sail in certain conditions, when we get to the new boat, we try to put the same. But if it doesn't feel good, with the time we're more open to do. It's never a huge change, but sometimes it's small changes. And it's important as well to know where we are. So we measure a lot of the positions of the tension and the rake. So when we come back to the shore, we can see where we were sailing and what conditions we were using. And yeah, we measure as many things as we want to copy on the boat, or the mast step position. Well, there's a lot of talking about this, but I think all the people know a lot. I also saw some conferences of Luis Soubier that were very interesting. So I think the important thing is to try to copy what you have, but I would say as an advice also not to be crazy about having exactly the same, because they're not 2 exact boats. Even the position of the routes and all this, they are not the same. So I think you need to be a bit open about changing. I learned a lot sailing with Alex Tinoco, that sometimes we were sailing with very different settings in boats that were supposed to be the same. But he always preferred the first days just to sail and not to look at the numbers until he felt good with the boat. And when he felt good, then we were measuring and then we know where we were. And sometimes we were sailing in 657, 58, and in another boat in similar conditions, we were sailing in 52, which is something that are a big difference. But if the boat was feeling good, I think some of the people like us that were engineers and were very technical, sometimes we follow too much the numbers, and sometimes I think it's good also to follow the feeling. But this would be a little bit how we try to approach a new venue, let's say.
Okay, thank you. So, Augie, do you want to add anything about this, or because I know that usually you sail with your own boat, even in big events in other continents, and you are a master about boat preparation. So, which are your advice?
So I do like working on the boats and preparing the boats, and I think this is a good thing for me because I like to be able to get to the starting line and feel like the boat's not going to hold me back. But in terms of preparing the boat, and I agree with everything Victor says, especially when you're chartering a boat, the issue of not over emphasizing your numbers and making sure that you remain flexible to change when you get to a new boat, a different boat, even if it's exactly like your boat at home. So I think these things, because also the other variable is the mast. The masts can be a little stiffer, a little softer, and so based on the mast itself, you have to make the necessary adjustments. I think the only other thing that I would add in terms of pre-regatta preparation is that I usually like to try to go on an app that I use for navigation and look at the bottom and try to understand how deep the bottom's going to be and try to predict how the water is going to move. And one of the things that I've also tried in going to a new venue is I usually try to seek what I would call a local expert that would talk to me about the conditions, the prevailing conditions, particularly in a particular venue. And I know that, and this is why I'm very open when people come and ask me about Biscayne Bay, I'm very open about giving them the book on Biscayne Bay, because then I feel better when I expect another sailor to do the same, and that's the only other thing. But Victor's points are right on, and I pretty much agree with everything he said.
So, Augie, you are famous for the monsters, for the green monster, full of tools and everything. It is very important for you for preparing the boat, this material.
Yes, a chartered boat. It's really nice to have a gearbox which you bring to the regatta with you. For one thing is, when I charter a boat, is I like to use my own spreaders and my own shrouds, as long as I'm going to use a sidewinder. And then I like bringing my jib sheets and my main sheet. And I recommend bringing as much gear. For example, if you have a particular boom vane that you set up that you like to use, they're pretty much adaptable to any boat, because that hangs off the mast and then off the boom. So then it's just a matter of leading it to the appropriate place in the boat. And I think in most cases, particularly if you're using a boat that's similar to your boat, you can adapt the vang. So I usually bring the vang with me. One thing that's very important that I like to do is, when I borrow or charter a boat, I like to give it back to the owner in that exact same condition that he gave it to me. And I also like to make improvements on the boat. So if the owner sees me doing something to his boat and he likes it, then as part of the charter or borrowing fee, I leave that on the boat. And I'm very particular about this, because I do lend a lot of boats. And then when they come back to me and they're not as I put them out, it creates a lot of problems for me, because then I have to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And about training on site, after work, this big work for preparing the boat, are you focused, Victor, more on the boat speed, or are you focused also, or more on understanding the sailing condition on the venue?
Yeah, well, I think that both are super important. So if you have the time, you need to prepare both things. So I would say if you have 4 or 5 days of sailing before a big event, I would do both things on every day. Actually, when you are testing the venue, you have to be sailing against someone or doing small regattas. So you are always testing your speed. There's no moment where you are not going to be testing your speed. I think the speed reaching and downwind, it's not something we are obsessed with training, because I think that's much more your technique than your settings. But upwind, we do like to test. To test, which is not to train. Like, we don't spend an hour doing an upwind, especially if it's strong wind, unless we're changing things. So we might sail for 2-3 minutes, then we stop if we want to change something, and we try to focus more about learning about the venue. We use also these smart watches that they record where you're sailing. They are, for the moment, they are forbidden in the regattas, but we use them when we're training. So later, when you go back on shore, you can download on your phone or on the laptop, and you see where you have been sailing. This, for example, in the last words in Brazil, when there was so much tide inside the strait between the island and the mainland, you could see in Aviones, which is something, the app that probably Augie was talking about, that the difference on depth was huge because there was a canal for the merchant ships to go. But when we were sailing and when we were looking at in the downwind, for example, someone made like 100 meters advance, something like crazy, we could see later, seeing the tracking, that he was into the channel. Or when they say you have to go all the way to the right, many times when you are on the boat sailing, you have an idea, or you appreciate that you are in a place in the water, that later on when you download this, it's not exactly what you thought. So I think it's also useful to record what you're doing. We don't use the watch to see the speed because I think they're not accurate enough, and the speed changes so much in the night that at least we don't think it's useful for this. But it is definitely useful to know where you're sailing. You can see in the sailing instructions where the races are going to be. And then when you are back, you say, well, we sailed where the race is going to be, or we sailed more on another place. The difference in depth, as Augie was saying, you can see where you were, and if some place was pain because there was more or less tide. So I think we try to focus more about the learning about the place than the speed itself, because the speed you test quite quick. If you are testing against people that you know and you know that they're fast, in probably 5 or 10 minutes of upwind, you know if you're fast, and then you know if you have speed problems or you're fine. So I think that's something that for good or for bad, you are quite quick to know, change things if you need to change, and then focus on learning about the venue, how much the wind shifts, how much time it shifts. The time, we always try to sail in the time that the regattas are. I see many people, like if the regattas are scheduled at 1 in the afternoon, people going in the water at 10. Well, if you need to test the speed, it's fine, but you're not going to sail with the conditions that you will have on the championship. Okay. So we try to do both, but it takes much more time to test the tactics, let's say, the conditions and how the place works than the speed.
And you, Augie, how you organize your training section on the water?
Yeah, I agree with Victor. I think it's important to look at both sides of and generally, I don't think we do at least as much about testing the conditions as we do the speed. We're ultra focused on understanding if we're going to be fast. But I agree with Victor that, and I've never used one of the watches that gives you the GPS location tracking, but I think that's a really good idea because it gives you a way to debrief what you did during the day, and by looking at that track, and will give you, like Victor has mentioned, an idea of what's happening. But both developing or confirming that your speed is good and developing a feel for the local conditions, I think, are equally important in the pre championship days.
Mm-hmm. And Augie, what's about having a coach for briefing and debriefing? And if, in your opinion, the coach should be a local expert?
So I have the experience where in 2001 at the World Championships, we Americans, we were in really good position to win, get third and fifth. And so, and I remember going into the last day, we had a very bad situation with, with the conditions, and the guys, the teams that had coaches were able to do very well. And consequently, I think I learned from that experience, and now I try to have, for at least the World Championship, a coach that will allow, that has local experience or has the ability to quickly figure out the local conditions, like Leandro did for us at the Worlds in Brazil. But yeah, I prefer having a local conditions coach, but the best is if you can have a guy like Leandro, who's very, very good, both tactically and with technically on the snipes. And then on top of that, he's awesome at figuring out the local conditions.
Victor?
It's a difficult question, because obviously the local knowledge, it's a super plus, but I think, at least in our perspective, you need to have a lot of confidence on the coach to make it really worth, let's say. So even if he's the super local star, if someone who I almost don't know, it's working as a coach for us, I don't think it would be as good as maybe someone who we have been training with for maybe a year, and he has traveled for us and he's learning by the time he's there. Because I mean, before the first race, obviously there are many things that any sailors know. But when the championship begins and you are in a big fleet, you might finish a race and you didn't even realize what happened with the rest of the guys. How did someone overtook 30 boats? And this, if you have the confidence in your coach and he's on the rib looking what's happening, he's gonna give you a lot of output of what has happened in the race that you maybe didn't even realize. So I would say that the first priority for me would be to have a coach that I trust on, and that he knows us and he knows which are our weak points and where we have to work more. Then maybe, obviously, if he knows about the local place and how does it work, it's much better. But like to pay someone like a local superstar to tell you where to go, I think it's difficult to get the confidence on someone that you don't know that much. I mean, at least for us, we have had sometimes coaches that were just for the championships, and with the time it becomes better and you get more confidence. But at the beginning, it's also a bit like difficult, let's say, to put all your confidence on someone that you don't know. But someone at the same time that doesn't know so much the venue, but he's looking at the race. I mean, any of us on the rib looking, if you're a sailor, looking at the race and knowing who are the strong guys of the fleet, they can give you so much feedback about what happened on the race that you didn't see or that you didn't realize, that makes you improve also. So I think it would be a mix of both. And if I had to choose, I would prefer someone that I know better and that knows us better than that who knows the spots.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I would like to ask Augie about his pre-race preparation each day before the races. So about the weather forecast, about the choice of sails or settings, the tactics and the strategies, and so on.
So my opinion is that weather forecasting is really hard, and to take the different weather forecasts, and generally the weather forecasts are for a macro area, for a big area, and to try to apply those weather forecasts to the areas that we sail in is really difficult. So I like looking at weather forecasts and trying to use that information but I'm usually very careful not to overemphasize or over consider that what's being told to us. Even the guys like Commander, the weather groups that are dedicated to sailing and are looking at local forecasts, even those guys, I think, have a tendency to make mistakes in the forecast. So I don't like to use that too much. I like to make an assessment. You know, I like to look at clouds, see how they're moving, and try to make an assessment based on the little weather knowledge that I have. But I don't like to go too crazy, and I like to stay very, very local with the way the weather patterns and the forecast. But that's my preference.
And what's about the choice of sails? You usually have a different type of sailing according to the wind. How many sail do you use for a championship?
So you get to measure 2 mains and 2 jibs. Generally, I've been measuring 2 standard jibs, but I've also been to regattas where I measure a heavier jib that I like to use, especially if I'm in a venue that I believe it can be windy. Then I definitely like to have what I would call a heavier jib, and that I find that handy. But in most cases, like for example, at the Worlds in Isabela, I measured in 2 standard jibs. So all I wanted to do was make sure that if for whatever reason I got in big breeze and blew the 1 jib out, that I had the same jib to go to and be able to use it. So
regarding the main,
I usually have also 2 models, a main that's slightly flatter for breeze, but the fact is that in many cases I end up measuring in 2 of the same standard sail.
Victor?
I think for a big race, what we've tried to have with the experience, with the years, it's to have only 1 kind of main and 1 kind of jib. If we were preparing for a 20 or 30 boats regatta, probably would have, well, for sure 2 mains. We would have a flatter and a fuller main, and probably just 1 jib. But on a big race, I think you need to have obviously a very good speed, but I don't think you are going to win a championship of 80 boats as a world championship, or you are going to do a good result because of your top speed, but more because of your tactics and positioning well and starting well. So to me, it's a release of pressure, of thinking about, am I with the right sail? Should I change? So we try to keep things very simple about settings, about set of sails. So the less things you need to think about, it's better for the tactics. So if it was for a 20 boats regatta where the speed is going to be super important because you're going to have a clean wind easily, and it's going to be all about speed, probably we would have 2 mains. But in such a big regatta where it's more about handling the pressure and doing good tactics and thinking as less as possible about all the rest, like what Augie was saying, of trying not to think about your boat since the start till the end, so everything works and you know the main. Because otherwise, I mean, the conditions change, and especially in the championships, you never have exactly what was on the forecast or what you thought. So let's say if you put the flat main because you thought it was going to be super windy, and then the wind drops, you are going to struggle because you are not going to be trained for sailing maybe in the light wind with that main. So these kind of situations, I think it's better for us at least to try to avoid them and to have something that we are, let's say, 95% as fast as we can with every condition, so we can focus on the tactics more than I forgot to put the other main, or like with crazy things changing all the time. Because for us at the end, it's worse. I mean, what we gain that 0.something% speed in certain conditions, we lose it by thinking too much about this. And if the conditions change, then you are with the main that you didn't like. We've sailed many years with 2 kinds of jibs, and now we always sail also with the only model, which doesn't mean that it's the same model all the championships. I mean, depending on the conditions we're expecting or the weight that we have or how we feel, We choose a model of jib and a model of main, and we try to measure the same 2 mains of the same model and 2 jibs of the same model.
Okay.
Which is, maybe it's a personal thing and it shouldn't be like this, but it's how we feel that it's better.
Okay. And Augie, now we are going on the race course, on the race area, and what is your routine, your pre-start routine before the start?
Well, I like going upwind for a period of time and try to get a feel for the conditions, what the shifts are. And I'd like to try to do that alongside another boat. So we're testing both the speed and the conditions in terms of the wind shifts. I like to do this with enough time to come back to the start and run the line in both directions at least once to get a feel for line sights and for whether the current is affecting the water moving at the start. And this way, if I can run the length of the line in both directions, it usually gives you a pretty good idea of what's happening with the water movement if you pay close enough attention to both ends of the line. So then after that, I just like to make sure that generally I'm a little bit distracted looking at the conditions, but by the time the 4-minute gun is up, the 4 minutes, I usually like to try to have decided where I'm going to start and have a plan on how to get to that spot by that 4-minute gun. And like I say, I'm usually late doing that, and that makes it difficult, at least for me, to execute a good start.
Victor?
Yeah, I think quite similar. We first tried to see if what we thought was going to happen regarding the conditions, it's what's actually happening, that many times it doesn't. So if there was a forecast or we had an idea, we check if it's happening. So maybe that would help us to know which side, at least of the upwind, it's going to pay more. So if what's happening is what it was expected, then we already have an idea of where to go in the upwind based on what we have seen on the last days. If it's not, then we need to see how much is it the wind changing, if there are gusts or not. So we try to read a little bit which the conditions are. I personally don't like to do speed tests before a big race. If it's a weekend race, obviously it's fine because it's learning. But if it's a big race, the day of the race, it's like way too late to change anything. So if I do speed tests and I'm fast, I'm probably gonna think, well, maybe he's struggling with something, or I'm not gonna, it's not gonna give me any extra confidence to feel that I'm fast. But if I do the speed test and I'm not fast, it's gonna destroy my day. So I don't like to do speed test. I think that the homework has to be done by the first day. So if you are not fast, you better see it while you are racing than before the race. And then, with the idea of where we want to go in the upwind, or if we're gonna tack every change of the wind, or if we have to go to one corner, then we read the star, we measure the direction of the wind, or between which directions it's moving, and we measure the star, how many degrees it's better on the boat or on the pin, and we try to make a decision about what kind of start we want to make. And every time they're whistling the 5 times, we measure again the line. So we never start a race without measuring the line and without taking a reference on the shore if possible. And well, this gives you the knowledge of what you're going to do in the first upwind. It's not the same the kind of start you make if you know you have to start and tack and go all the way to the right, like it was in Ilhabela, for example. That if you know it's a place that it shifts a lot and you will have to tack maybe 15 or 20 times in the upwind. So based on how the upwind looks, you make the decision of where to start. I remember actually in the first race of the Worlds, I think probably 50% at least of the fleet already knew that you had to start and tack. But it was a way better start on the pin than on the boat. But we anyways decided to start on the boat to make it easier to start and tack. and Augie did like a super class pin start, and then he tagged. And because we started well as well, but we were on the boat, and when we looked, he was much better than us, but we had to do all the upwind. And I remember he was not reaching, but for sure also not close upwind, trying to gain the space to the right and trying to sail as fast as possible to the right, because he also knew that the upwind was on the right. That gives you an idea, you know, like he started on the pin, but he knew not only that he had to tack just after the start, but also that he had to go maybe 5 degrees lower than the normal upwind just to gain meters to the right and not let the fleet on the right go too much there. And I think these are the kind of things that maybe after 2 or 3 days racing, everyone knows, but probably it's for many people already too late to make a good result. And people like Augie before the first race, they already know, or they have a plan of where to go. And I think these kind of things make the difference between a good sailor and a world championship.
Okay, regarding your starting tactics, I remember in some regattas, especially the last day, that you look at your opponents, and so you change your strategy before the start regarding your position in the standings.
Yeah, I mean, you always have to understand who you're sailing against. So I do try to keep but I don't get too much focused on that. I think if you're in the lead, for example, at the Worlds where we finished 31st, I was not worried about the points, and I was not worried about my situation. I was just focused on having the best race possible, because you can go crazy. But at end of events, when it's down to 2 races and it's down to 3 or 4 different sailors for the lead, then yes, I'd like to have a very good idea of how I modify my approach. Although actually it depends very much on the conditions. I think if you have more than 1 or 2 guys that you have to sail against, then it's usually you're better off sailing your own race. So it really depends on the situation, and it varies.
Okay. Victor, and do you change your strategy after the first race of the day, and you have a debrief with your crew, with the coach, and then you have another starting plan?
Well, yeah, depending if what we thought for the first race worked out or not, and if we spoke with the coach and he saw something that we didn't, and the conditions keep the same. I mean, the learning curve, it's way better after the first race. So probably if the things didn't go right, or they went right but we didn't really know why, we might change about what we're gonna do in the second race. We don't look much also until the last day on what the other people are doing. Well, but we definitely don't start, let's say, windward of one of the guys that we know is a superstar, because like 9 out of 10 times he's gonna kill you. So we try to position ourselves in the line not too close with the people with the different conditions that we know that are very strong, or at least not in the windward. And yeah, we try to sail our regatta at least until the last day when you have to make the calculations of the points. Well, if I'm in a place where I know there are very good local sailors and they're all going to one corner, I normally wouldn't think that I'm smarter than them and that I'm choosing right, let's say. So you do look about good local sailors, where are they going, what are they doing, but nothing too big, because also in the big regattas as the Europeans or World Championship, there are so many good sailors that you could get lost. I mean, you would find a reason in every corner to go, because probably there's a top sailor in any corner. So yeah, we don't look much about specific people. It's more about doing our race and what we think that could work. And we also look a lot when people do very, very good recoveries in a race, like someone was 40 and he finished 10 or 15th. We try to learn, where did he go? What did he do? Did he sail in the middle? Did he went to the corner? Where did he overtake? Because I think that's the good learning. I think in most of the high-level regattas, if you start well, like in Regatta, if you started in the boat and tacked, it doesn't matter how good was your speed, you were going to be between 10 and 15. for sure. If you had a good start and you managed to tack and have clean wind, because there were maybe only 5 or 6 boats doing that, and there was so much difference that it doesn't matter. I mean, it was a different regatta. So we tried to look what the people in the front are doing, how much risk does it involve. The risk management, I think, is also very important. If you had already an OCS, how many people they are whistling with OCSs. So to learn, should we take more risk or not? I think Ilhabela was the example of a championship without taking risk at the start. It was impossible to win because it was, I think, almost everywhere. It was all the way to the corner. Any average sailor starting on the boat every race and going to the corner, I think would have been top 10 in the world for sure, because there were no options, and it is what it is. So the time it takes you to learn this, it's obviously time you're giving to the rest of the people.
Okay, Augie, do you want to add anything?
I think no, I agree with Victor's comments, and that issue of understanding why people are able to get through the fleet, I think is critical, because that gives you a set of data that's very important for that particular race course.
Okay, so I think we talk about the regatta preparation. I have to say thank you very much, Augie, Agostino, for for saying to us all your secret, and
anything for my Italian brother.
And of course, thank you, Victor. I hope to see you soon in some regattas.
Hopefully, yeah.
Maybe I'm planning, as I said to you before this video conference, to come in Spain when the borders will be open again. And of course, we also wait Augie here in Europe for sailing with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you guys for organizing, and looking forward to see you sailing soon, whatever, but looking forward to sail.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Pietro. Bye, Victor. Ciao, ciao.